Hi, I'm Kelly from the RStudio Solutions Engineering team. On this episode of the SolEng cast, you'll hear my colleague Chris Overholt talk about a new set of model management resources that have just been made available on solutions.rstudio.com.
So model management is really defined as a workflow within the overall model lifecycle. When you deploy more than one model in production, you have the problem of which one am I serving, which one is better than the other, how do I swap models in production, how do I tune models to make it better. So you kind of have this logistics problem. This is all part of the model lifecycle, and the really important thing here is Connect is a solid part of a model deployment pipeline, especially, we showed things around CI/CD workflows with Git, Jenkins, things like that. So this is really targeted to the user, the analyst, of what can they do today in Connect to empower and grow from just a REST API to sort of an end-to-end process, right? So I'll walk through these steps here. And on this page, we basically say, this is the model lifecycle. These are some of the important stages, right? So you have data, you split it into training and test data, you select and train a model, you test that model, and then you put it in production serving. And at some point, you're going to iterate, whether it's in the model evaluation stage or in the production stage, and say, I want to change my model, whether that's parameters or the library, and always improve the results and predictions based on real world data. So we talk about what kinds of things you can do in RStudio Server Pro and Connect, like deploying multiple versions of a model, looking at revisions, and then we basically give an example that says, we want to do A/B testing on multiple models using XGBoost. And what we're going to do is to have two versions of a model, serve that in production, have a router that's routing some of the traffic to model A, some to model B, and then have a dashboard that lets us kind of verify the behavior of our model pipeline, right? So we've taken this workflow and said, let's apply that to a real world problem in Connect. And you can see each one of these colored boxes, right, are assets that are deployed to Connect, right? So the model training notebooks, those are deployed for reproducibility. The REST APIs with Plumber are deployed. Another REST API with Plumber is deployed as a router, and then there's a model dashboard in Shiny. So it's a nice way to say, what's your workflow, what's your day-to-day life, and how do you map that to Connect and what you actually want to do to get your job done. So the steps here walk through the different stages of model management, right, or the model lifecycle. So I'll walk through these briefly, and you can dig in on your own and kind of see what's going on. But I'll give you the quick run through. This is loading in XGBoost, and we're loading in a credit card data set that has information on demographics and payment history that says what is the probability that someone is going to default on their credit card payment. So we split into test and training. We train the model with XGBoost, and then we find the important parameters, right, are the payment history in this particular model. So we then serialize that model, save it, and that's what we're going to use to serve in a REST API later. And we can do some quick predictions and say the accuracy of this model based on the test data is about 82 or 83%. We can do some sample predictions and say this is someone who has a good payment history. They have a low, like in the 12% range, of a probability of default. Somebody with a bad payment history has a 70% chance of default, right? So we've stored all of that kind of history, parameters, training, all in a notebook. You could even schedule this or run it as a background job in Launcher, right? So a lot of flexibility around that. Once you've trained the model, you can serve it in production. We've all seen that. Very easy to wrap with a few lines of Plumber. So now I can come in here and throw in, so let's throw in our person with a bad payment history. We'll throw that in here as an input. And out there we get the prediction and which model it came from. So this is model A that I just showed. The next few steps are very similar. We're going to train another model, but we're going to change a parameter, right? You could change the library you're using. You could change the hyperparameters. Here we're just changing the booster from GB tree, a tree-based model, to GB linear, a linear-based model. Still using XGBoost. So we train, we do the same thing. We actually notice that there are different important factors, right, in a different order. Same thing, serialize the model, test it, test the predictions. We can deploy that as a new version in Connect, right? So now we have model B serving its predictions. And the last few pieces are saying, how do we manage these versions of a model, right? We can do, every time you deploy a model, you get a new bundle. So you can always roll back. You can create custom API routes that you'll notice these all have vanity URLs. You can do separate API deployments like we did to have Model A and Model B. So now that we've done that, we're going to A/B test. So if I jump over to this deployed model at Model Router, what this does is it's going to route 80% of the traffic to Model A, 20% of the traffic to Model B. So every time I run this, you can see Model A is returning most of the time, and then sometimes, 20% of the time, we get Model B with its prediction, right? So we have a router, we have A/B testing, we've prescribed the amount of traffic we're splitting. And the last piece of this is, how can we see how all of this looks as a consumer? So I built there's a Flex dashboard around it. So what it's doing is making N number of API hits, right? You can change that here. And it's telling us whether it's coming from Model A or Model B. So we can use this to verify and say, like, is the model router doing what we expect? We should be getting back about 80% of the hits from Model A, 20% from Model B. We see their predictions. So these have a lower risk of defaulting. If we can change the payment history to like someone that's 2 to 4 months late, see that shifts up, and we can get an idea of like what is the average probability from the two models, what's the round trip time, which is really translates into like requests per second if you take the reciprocal of that. So it's a nice way to see kind of the end to end. So all of this code is in GitHub. People can jump here, and these 6 pieces are broken up into projects. You can also click on these and see all the deployments in Connect. But again, the purpose of this is to get an idea, tell a story around models, REST APIs. How do you do model management compared to this? What are some of the really painful parts that we can help you with, right? So it's a really nice use case for something like Connect, using all the functionality to orient it to a real problem like model management.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the SolEng cast from RStudio. If you enjoyed this episode, please share your thoughts and questions on the episode show notes page found at community.rstudio.com in the R Admins forum.